Alrighty then. I think we're good to go. Welcome back to another episode of the Black Eyes Podcast. We're gonna get slippy and slidey. You can't see it because it's on the road. It's on the road and it's dark and you can't see it, but it's there. It's gonna beat you up. Hello, Sam and Dalia. You know what? What's up with your accent, mayonnaise man? Anyway, so today we're talking. Today we're gonna be talking about Afrosurrealism and Afrofuturism. Uh, Basically, who should I put on the spot this time? Uh, Sam, you get put on the spot again. What do you know about those two things? Mhm. And one of those works was Sorry to Bother You, if I remember. Okay. It's such a good movie. Oh my god. Okay. So, it's alright. So, for anybody who hasn't watched it, including Delia, so um, basically we see a guy. His name is Cassius, and he's poor. He's living in his uncle's garage, uh, and generally it's pretty much the same society we live in now. I'm pretty sure it's set in California, um, Oakland. Yes, it's set in Oakland, uh, but it's like this weird alternate version of Oakland. We see Cassius driving around. His car is old and beat up. Um, there's like strings on the windshield wipers to like be able to do that. He pulls up to a gas station at some point towards the beginning of the movie and uh, gives them 40 cents to put in his tank. Uh, generally he's down with his luck and he is going to a job interview. That's kind of what the the beginning of the movie is. He's going to a job interview at a call center. Um, and he gets there. He has like a trophy that he bought online, like fake uh, references, fake bosses to call and stuff, and like just an overall fake resume because he really is trying to get a job. And then the guy, doesn't really care. He's like, "This is not a hard job. You're probably gonna do fine." Tells him stick to the script or something like that, or like always be calling. I think is like the motto. And he goes and sits down. He sits next to an old black man. He's trying really hard to make calls and sell things, but it's not working. So the black guy, this old black man, says, "Hey man, you just need to use your white voice." And when when he says this, the old black man goes into uh, his speech saying, "Hello, welcome, thank you for calling Regal. Thank you for buying with Regal View, which is the company." And the white voices, it's not his voice. His voice is being dubbed over by, I can't remember. I'm looking it up. But like whenever he talks using the white voice, he is lip sync. He's like syncing his lips to like Patton Oswalt or something. I think is one of them. Uh, and like that guy David Patton Oswalt and David Cross. They're the two white voices for Cassius and this old man, and they're just lip syncing to these two guys, and it's really a little creepy to watch. But at the same time, immediately after he starts using it, he is like so many calls. He's like actually getting through, and he's actually making sales. And the way that the movie frames it is the way he sees it, and the way the movie frames it is he is getting dropped into these people's houses. Like he's sitting at his desk, and his desk appears like right next to the people he's calling, so he can see them. Yeah, and he's like sitting like adjacent to their kitchen table, like across from them, and he watches them hang up. And there's a scene with some two adults doing consenting adult things. Uh, but the guy still answers the phone, so like Cassius is just kind of watching for a second before the guy hangs up, and that's kind of the conceit of how the calls go. The calls are us watching Cassius get dropped in front of these people and seeing that they don't want to listen to him. They keep hanging up on him consistently, but like when he's trying to just be himself, and as soon as he puts on the white voice, is when he immediately starts getting um, recognition and sales and stuff, and then he becomes the highest seller. And then he goes up to be a power caller, where he gets to be an executive, but all of his friends are still poor and being left downstairs. Um, and then up in the power caller room, any black sellers, power callers, have to use the white voice all the time. And they're not selling like things regal like the downstairs people are selling. They're selling like power and like weapons and like political power basically. Um, and that's kind of what it is. And then he eventually meets the owner of the company. The owner of the company invites him to a party. There's a lot of not not safe for work things going on, I think, at this party. Uh, and he eventually shows him a video of how humans have always used tools and how humans have always evolved. So the next step in evolution is human horse hybrids. They don't even try to like sugarcoat it or anything. It is just human horse hybrid people uh, who, after snorting a white powder, turn into horses. And then uh, Cassius is offered to be turned into one of these people and to become their ambassador, uh, and like kind of be on the inside. And he says no, obviously. Um, and then he's offered. They are at a party, so they're already doing some substances. He's offered said white powder, and then he does it. But then they watch the video about the horse people, and then he's like, "Did you turn me into a horse?" And he's like, "No, no, 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 man, nah, man. It's just regular, good old fashioned cocaine." Uh, and then yada 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 stuff happens, and then they let out all the horse people, and they let them free in the streets, and they start a revolution of the horse people. And then at the end of the movie, after everything's said and done, it seems like everything's going back to normal. The status quo has been reestablished, and then right at the end, Cassius Clay is closing the garage door of his uncle's garage, and then he hits his nose on something, which doesn't make sense because like why? How did he hit his nose? He's not even that close. And then we see his face, and he turns, and he's turning into a horseman. Right at the end, and then it cuts, and that's the end of the movie with him partially turned into a horseman. So that's that for surrealism. uh, did I leave? I don't think I left anything out that was important. Yeah. But that's kind of what that is. I said it towards the end of the last episode that surrealism is born out of this inherent apathy that people feel because you know life sucks and you every time you try to do something positive in a peaceful way you kind of get knocked down, and it kind of leads once you've grown up like that and you've seen your family members and friends and stuff like that happen, you kind of develop an apathy, which isn't particularly fun for most people, I don't think. Uh, so that kind of leads to making art that isn't logical is a little bit weird because who cares? Why does it matter? It's already stuff's already bad to begin with, so might as well get a little weird, right? Um, that's kind of what that is. I think there's a couple other movies like Get Out is a really good example of that too, while also being a horror movie. Horror movies are already a little bit surrealist, a little bit out there, but Get Out is already is a pretty good example. Um, and any Jordan Peele movie really. Um, so yeah, and then Afrofuturism is kind of from that same thing where it's like escapism. It's the same thing regular sci-fi exists. Life is hard, so you want to escape from it to a far, far away place. But it's kind of centering it specifically around black people and experiences and voices and culture. Because there's no black people in Star Wars until The Force Awakens. And well, there was Lando Calrissian, but there was such a lack of black people that like people noticed or black people noticed. Uh, and then there was Star Trek, but still it's very few and far between. Um, so it's kind of like centering black people. It's like, yeah, of course we would be in the future. It's the future. We would be there. Uh, so there's that, and then there's like another aspect to Afrofuturism that I think is really cool. It's like, what if we left? What if everyone just left Africans in Africa alone and just kind of let them do their thing? Wanna know what happens? Wakanda happens. That's right. I'm talking about Black Panther. Uh, Black Panther. Yeah, it's the Wakandans. They're after you. Yeah. Yeah. Anyway, sorry. I was just checking to make sure I could be heard on the stream. Uh, yeah. So yeah. So we know what happens in Black Panther. They're they have vibranium. They're super intelligent. They're super technologically advanced, and they're hidden from the rest of the world. Uh, which yeah, if you let people alone, if you left them alone and you let them innovate, really cool things can happen. When you're constantly shipping them over the course of like 300 years, 400 years, and then like burn down their towns and flood them and put them under lakes, not too much innovation is going to be happening. I don't think. Not too much making airplanes is going to be happening. But yes. Hmm? Which is like that's cute. First of all, that's adorable. If you think you can bomb them, they had aliens coming from space and they couldn't get through. Your nukes are going to destroy the everything else, but inside that dome they'll be fine. Um, but yeah, it's like immediately as soon as they find out that this super technologically advanced place exists and there's a resource that the Europeans and Americans don't have, you want to know what they immediately try to do? Break in and steal it. Like they immediately showed to everyone in themselves why Wakanda stayed hidden and isolated for so long. Because the moment that they came out and were like, "Hey, maybe we can share with you guys," they were like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," tried to steal it. So that's like that other aspect of Afrofuturism, not just like, oh yeah, of course there's gonna be, of course if you're in a galaxy far far away and there's spaceships and you can travel to planets in like an hour, of course black people should be there. And then there's the aspect of, well, actually, they'd probably be much more technologically advanced than you if you left them alone because, you know, life originated in Africa, so the most amount of people are going to have been there for the longest amount of time. So maybe leave them alone. Uh, yeah, so those are like the what we're going to be talking about today. Like from that movie, I think many more people have watched Black Panther than they have the other movie. Uh, yeah. So, um, so I'm not really gonna read.
Billy, where'd you go? Can you guys hear me?
Yep.
Oh, cool.
Okay. Well, sorry, my headphones disconnected for a second. Yes, I can hear you.
Oh, there they go again.
Damn.
Technical difficulties.
Yo. So, Dalia, you're cutting out a lot. There you go.
Middle of like dating, so yeah, fam.
Just dox yourself. Crazy.
Come on now, come on.
Dog, my headphones disconnected, and they weren't connecting. Anyway, so the topic that we're talking about, and this is all getting left in. So, hi, my teacher. Hope you're having fun. Anyway, so, uh, so th- we know. So now we know where, what those genres are, kind of examples of them, and where they come from. That's it. We're done. Bye. No. Uh, that's a wrap. No. I just want to like specifically highlight that why I think it's so important. And I think it's important because we humans have always made art, right? In general, art's always been a part of human nature. And when yeah, um, and there's different types of art. There are very realistic art pieces, like genres of art, and where you do represent things as they are. But then humans are also really prone to apathy and really prone to giving up or wanting to give up at least. And I feel like that's a very specific feeling. Uh, so like between World War I and World War II, a lot of artists were like, well, why continue? So why would I care about if something's realistic if the reality I live in sucks so bad? That's where Pablo Picasso's art kind of comes in. He's representing it not even as it is, but how he maybe not even is perceiving it, but just kind of in a way that's not real, in a way that's blocky and like abstract and looks strange. Um, just because it makes more sense that way, right? Um, so I feel like everyone's familiar with the type of art that's like, oh yes, representing something not as real, like Dadaism or surrealism. We have that famous picture of like that apple in front of that guy's face or whatever. Uh, like yeah, that's a very prominent piece of surrealist art because he doesn't have a face. There's just an apple there, and it's like, oh, why is the apple there? You know. Uh, but the Black Experience specifically kind of gives um, a different kind of reasoning behind why that art exists. Because I showed you guys and kind of what we read up on. Um, there were so many different ways that people have like, oh, tried to build something up, tried to better themselves, tried to do something good, and then it all gets kind of ripped away anyway. And you know, that leads to a really specific kind of apathy. So it's not just like, oh, wars and people are dying and why, powerful people are going to be doing whatever they want. I'm going to make something crazy to show how I feel about this war. It's the place where I live is inherently dangerous for me to live in, and it's really, really bad, and I don't like it. But I also love it at the same time, and then that has a specific feeling that leads to um, a different kind of art. I I tend to explain myself in the things I think so much that there's not much room for there's no questions you guys can ask. Well, yeah, 'cause you guys can't ask. Hmm. Yeah. Yeah. Which Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, because there's a level of the over explaining is like a level of wanting to be understood, wanting to make sure that I don't like that because so many people are constantly questioning the fact that people feel like something bad is happening all the time. So it's like, well, if you already don't think that my lived experience exists because Abraham Lincoln gave a speech one time, then I'm gonna make sure that I get my point across in as efficiently as a way, in as many ways as I have to make sure that you understand why what you're saying is stupid. That's where that comes from for me. And then I know that other people like Donald Glover doesn't feel the need to do that. Like the This America video is also incredibly surreal to watch. It's incredibly wild, and he, until very recently, like a couple of weeks ago, never explained anything about it. Didn't really explain where the song came from, like what the idea was behind it, kind of any of the filming of it. He didn't really explain any of that outright until like a couple weeks ago on like a GQ video or something like that. So there is a level of like I shouldn't have to over explain myself all the time that I think people fall into because they spend so much time over explaining, trying to get the point across, and it doesn't work. So they end up just like not, and making something wild and crazy and incredibly difficult to understand at a glance. And then you do ask them questions, and they're like, "No, you had your chance to listen to me when I was offering it. Now you just have to sit in it and think about it for yourself, and maybe reflect on yourself, and maybe that can help you see it." Keep.
Rosalia.
Um. Uh. No. I'm understanding what's being said. I'm listening and interpreting everything, but
Yeah. How do you feel about Donald? How do you feel about Donald Glover? Mhm. Yeah. Yeah. Or they don't want to, or he doesn't want to be perceived as soft, uh, while performing his rap, because he's a comedian and he's a rapper, and he very much tries to separate the two people almost. Yeah. It's like he knows that he's not the typical, you know, showing. He doesn't show his masculinity in a particularly typical way. He doesn't like overshow it too much. He like in his general life and in his previous career, uh, but at the same time, people don't usually take those kinds of guys seriously. So he's like, no, I'm, sometimes I am soft. Not every time, and you're gonna treat me with the respect I deserve. Mhm. Oh yeah, like he was a his character on Community is like a silly, goofy guy. Um, like he's Troy and Abed in the morning. He's a silly guy doing silly things a lot of the time. Like, and I feel like that character is kind of shedding a lot of the preconceived notions we have about what people who look like him should be acting like. And I think that that's an incredibly specific and important character. And then at the same time, he does have his like harder persona that he puts on as Childish Gambino. But then that name doesn't really follow the conventions that other rappers follow, and then his music doesn't follow the same conventions. So whenever he does something, he does it in a way that's established, and then he also breaks the establishment at the same time. Yeah. Uh, yeah. I think it's just a very very uh, interesting uh, topic. So we kind of talked about surrealism. Uh, a couple shows to watch if anybody wants to. Atlanta, obviously great show. Season 3, episode 1 is crazy. It goes over like a true story of like these black foster kids who were killed by their two white foster moms who like drove them off a cliff. It and it like goes through that but like changes the story a little bit where like the one of the main little boys like saves him and his siblings. It's crazy. Like the moms have a line at one point where it's like, why did nobody stop us? And it's just it hits really hard, so I recommend people watch that. um and then Sorry to Bother You is an incredibly good movie. My description was pretty detailed but doesn't do the visuals justice at all. um and then any music video that Donald Glover's ever put out is probably a really good place to start as well. Oh, yeah, Tyler the Creator is also like just the way he acts. Like when he was on the internet around when he was in Odd Future, um, a lot of those videos and stuff that he would make with like that little girl Esmeralda or whatever, like those are incredibly wild videos. That whole group didn't really dress um, like maybe they as rappers they should have. They dressed preppy. They dressed like kids who were supposed to be like on a golf course or something. So they didn't like fit the mold, and they dressed a little bit, weird for who they were, and then like showed up, and like the music they made was really good, and then the creators' music's a little bit out there sometimes, and then the personas they put on were also incredibly surreal to watch sometimes. Like that music video, he has a blonde wig on, and he's like dancing around. It looks like a mix of like I don't even know what it's a mix of. It almost like it's like the Outcast video. Uh, that one where they're on the stage in green. I can't remember what the song's called. Yeah, my baby won't mess around. Oh, I think it isn't it like I don't know. My baby won't mess around. Like that's yeah, yeah. Hey yeah by Outcast. That video is also like really like out there, a little bit weird for like artists at the time. So I think ultimately, Black Afro surrealism can come in many different forms. It can be in varying levels of severity and surreality. You can either have things pretty soft, like the Outcast music video, which is not super weird, but they're doing something different than most black people would at the time. And then you have things like Sorry to Bother You, which are on the exact opposite of the spectrum, where it's like you know have all this imagery and all these metaphors and all these like allegories happening at all times, and it's like shoving everything directly in your face, but also turning it up to 11. And I think those are like just some wild examples, just like two very different examples of a similar genre. It's like the difference between like what's another genre with like a very wide spectrum. It's like a Marvel kids animated TV show on like Disney Junior or something versus like The Boys on Amazon Prime, or like Invincible, where it's like superhero genre, and then one of them is like Invincible, like a superhero cartoon, but like one of them's for kids and they learn how to be good friends, and the other one people are getting ripped apart like physically from their bodies. And I think that's like a similar thing. It's like two very different ends of a similar genre, and I think all of it is worth watching. Uh, yeah. Anyway, onto the future, into the future. We talked about it. Yeah, we already talked about it a little bit, but I think it, there's no way of knowing what would have happened if people left Africa untouched. But I think if humanity didn't come up being so vindictive and constantly trying to hurt itself in each other and other people who didn't agree with them because of like religion or race, I think the world would be so much more advanced. We have the Library of Alexandria, which at the time had a similar level of scientific comprehension as like the 1800s to 1900s. Like before the Dark Ages, we had a knowledge of science that was that rivaled like coming up like not quite cell phones, not quite like telegraph lines and stuff like that, but we were getting very very close in terms of our knowledge of like mathematics and science and stuff like that. And if we like let's say we didn't burn if they didn't burn that down, and let's say we kind of left Africa alone and let them have their natural resources and kind of develop over the full course of their development as a civilization, and just kind of everyone just kind of like let people develop, I think we would have a significantly richer world now because we'd have a lot more knowledge, we'd have a lot more mythologies to kind of see and play with and learn about, like even just as stories, like we do with like Greek mythology and like ancient Roman mythology. Like we have books about them. Like we have the Percy Jackson series and stuff like that. I think we'd have so many more things like that that would be so rich to learn about if we did things differently at some point. Yeah. Yeah. Totally. Yeah. Mm. Yeah. Yeah. Uh it's always there's always going to be an ideal world, and there's always going to be a million different possibilities where something goes wrong somewhere along the line, whether it's towards the beginning, whether it's towards the end. Something will go wrong somewhere. Um, but the fact that we didn't even get the possibility, because maybe you know Africa developed a little bit and then decided, we're gonna invade all of South Asia. It's like, okay, that would be pretty bad, honestly. No cap, on God for real. But we didn't even give other like Europeans didn't even give other civilizations to even attempt to become imperialist. It's like snuffing out a flame before it's even sparked. And I feel like that's what mostly what I mean. Not necessarily that things were going to be perfect and kumbaya forever, but I just giving more places a chance to not be forever subjugated. You know, you know. That's why the genres exist. That's why they are gaining popularity because it's seeing something familiar from a different voice. Um, and I think that's just incredibly important. And I think that's what this podcast is for. That's what um, we love to see it, right? I think it's about 30 minutes. I think uh, I think we'll be just about. I think we're just about there. Um, just because I think we talked so much during the other sections that I think all the cursory knowledge is is here for what we talked about. I know one of us couldn't really talk all too much, but I think ultimately this podcast is about learning, and silence is sometimes the only way to learn in some situations. I think that's what some of us were here for. Yeah. And ultimately, it also was for anybody watching to learn something. I actually do have a playlist of all the things that I watched um, and took information from. So I'm going to be putting that in the description and going back and putting it in the description of all the videos so people can watch kind of everything that I kind of got knowledge from and a couple of videos that I know a couple of us have seen that just get to show that we can keep learning and that learning is important and that this is an interesting topic worth learning about. Alright guys, this video is sponsored by Skillshare. uh, this is sponsored by Honey. Use code BLACKICE for free Amazon Prime. Oh, don't use anything we said on principle alone. Anyway, I know two of us kind of got to get going, but thank you guys for helping me and talking to me about this stuff. And I hope you guys do want to continue learning about a lot of this stuff because it is incredibly interesting if you get into the weeds of it. But yeah. Thank you for listening. Uh, Thank you guys for joining me, and I will see you next time on the Black Eyes Podcast. Well, I gotta. There is the secret fourth episode. Burp, 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 burp.